should have covered this before we started the episode. Have you guys read the sequences?
Yes.
The two specifically for today?
Yes.
Okay, so would you like to join us on that conversation, or do you not care about that?
That sounds fun to me.
I'm happy to join, yeah.
Okay.
I can probably knock them out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, anchoring is easy and established. Although I think has been, less overblown in the last decade than it was when this was published, but it's still a thing.
Anchoring's still a super useful concept, though, because I feel like it's one that I am aware of and use all the time. I don't know if use is the right word, but, use the fact of being aware of it.
We should quickly mention what it is then. The first post that we talk about is Anchoring and Adjustment. It's the title of it. And it basically covers the phenomenon known as anchoring, which I believe we are all very familiar with now. But to quickly reiterate what it is, it's when you are shown a number or made aware of a number. A number is brought to your consciousness. Your brain kind of uses that as an anchor for whatever the next thing that you're thinking about is, even if they are absolutely unrelated in any way. The common one, the experiment that's cited in this study is someone rolls a Wheel of Fortune type thing to get a random number and then asks people questions that are somewhere in the range of that number. I believe it was how many countries in Africa are in the United Nations?
Yeah.
And the wheel is set... is fixed to stop on a number, but it's seemingly
for
random.
the study, it was a low ball or a high ball number, and then the two groups of the study would anchor on the high or the low number, adjusting up or down, or somewhere within the range of whatever number they were shown. But
you can get insane shit like this, asking people their zip code and then how many doctors do you think practice in the state of California, or what was the one that someone did to me in college? It was some anchor, and then how long do you think the Mississippi River is?
Okay.
And what was fun is the teacher had the question up on the whatever projector or whatever it was we were using, and half the class was to not look at not to look first, and then the second half was to look later, and the anchor number was different. Awesome. And I can't remember how significant the result was because the teacher would have gone off and done it the next day, but I'm sure she found something because that all rings a bell.
It has a really strong effect whenever they test it. And I want to point out that, anchoring doesn't just work on numbers, although that's what they focus on in this sequence, but things like proposing solutions to a problem. If, I don't know, the example of you're in a boardroom and it's okay, we're, a business, we have this problem. I was thinking about doing this, but what do you all think? If you start with that, then everybody's going to anchor on whatever you said and kind of, propose solutions that are in line with that, or that are variations on that, where you'd get original solutions if you didn't say, well, here's what I was thinking of and here's a few other things, but really, what do you guys think?
So if you want a variety of answers, you tell people to think of them first and then write down and share after. And if you want to railroad your own solution, you kind of present it first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wondered how general a concept this is, as because it seems like a very naturally human thing to just kind of perturb around where you have been primed in concept space, and I feel like you could show that this is just what humans do in general as a problem solving prior, is start from some base and then move around there, and it's just it's a bias, but it's actually an effective bias sometimes, but it's almost,
I think it's really similar or connected to the social proof idea, because we do sort of just look around to see what everybody else is doing in order to see okay, I have an idea, or maybe I have an idea, is this acceptable? Are other people kind of thinking the same kind of thing? Or I don't have an idea, but I better find one quick. What are other people thinking? I better just nod and agree. Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, this one time I was in a probabilistic risk assessment course, a professional week-long course, and they were showing they'd show a whole bunch of grains of corn on the screen or something, and they'd be like, how many grains of corn is it? And I was like, oh, this is an anchoring guessing thing. and I just was like, okay, I think I'm supposed to say 50, so I'm going to say 300. And then I was the most wrong out of anyone because I overcompensated way too much, and it was really embarrassing.
At least you're a fun outlier, though.
Yeah. Well, so I think if I have a point, it's that you can't compensate for anchoring just by randomly throwing yourself away from the anchor necessarily. I don't actually know a easy, straightforward algorithm for not.
Yeah, well, actually, at the end of the sequence, they say, try to think of an anchor in the opposite direction. Or wait, I'll just I guess read the whole thing. Debiasing manipulations for anchoring have generally proved not very effective. I'd suggest these two. First, if the initial guess sounds implausible, try to throw it away entirely and come up with a new estimate, rather than sliding from the anchor. But this in itself may not be sufficient. Subjects instructed to avoid anchoring still seem to do so. So second, even if you're trying the first method, try also to think of an anchor in the opposite direction, an anchor that's clearly too small or too large, instead of too large or too small, and dwell on it briefly. So actually, yeah, maybe the correct thing to do is okay, they want me to say 50, so I'm tempted to say 500, maybe in between there.
Another possible lesson is that there's time pressure, and in reality, if it was an important decision, I could have just counted the grains. And maybe the lesson is, if possible, just get more data in a situation where you feel like you need to make a snap judgment, but no, maybe you need to just actually figure it out, or figure out how to get closer to the estimate.
Treat all information like an info hazard. And then it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Including your experimental results.
Has there been more research on this in the past 13 years? I mean, I'm sure there has, but on ways on how to avoid being anchored. But does the thinking of some number in the opposite direction help at all?
I don't think a lot of research is done on, here's a cognitive bias, let's study ways to try to, the rationalist community is kind of at the forefront of trying to overcome our biases. A lot of clinical research is trying to still just figure out how we think, what we do in various situations.
I'm just wondering, if I were to go in before I was to ask for a raise and just think I'm really worth $1 million a year. I should really just ask for $1 million a year.
They did say that in the
Probably.
They said it somewhere in the
Yeah, it says there's
sequence.
obvious applications in, say, salary negotiations or buying a car. I won't suggest that you exploit it, but watch out for exploiters. I don't know why he would suggest not to exploit it.
Yeah.
I think
I think might as well just highball my boss with,
Yeah.
Because that's dark arts.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, I want to walk into a car dealership and be like, I think this car is worth about $200. and then just say that 10 times and just get that anchor as low as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I should have done that. There's a lot of talk in anchoring. Might even have its own chapter in influence, science, and practice.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
And I wish I'd done this when buying cars. Now, at least the handful of dealerships, I haven't bought a car since 2013 up until January, and every dealership I went to, they have the price. Doesn't go up or down. It does include lot fees, but there's zero haggling. And I even asked the guys, look, for real, if I gave you $500, you couldn't knock $1,000 off this car. He's like, that I literally can't. So I'm inclined to believe that that's actually the case because I offered to bribe somebody.
But that's such a strat, right? That's exactly what the car salesman's going to say. It's no, this price, it cannot change. I am sorry.
But do you think that his commission with $1,000 less on the car plus $500 in his pocket in cash would be less than his commission if the car stayed at full price?
Well, it seems like it's not a commission thing. It's just a car lot policy thing now where they cannot change the price. The real question is, did you try just leaving, being well, I'm not willing to buy it for this price. If you can knock $1,000 off, call me back, and then go and never come back again?
I was able to haggle much more aggressively in 2013 for the car I've got.
Okay.
It was stickered at $800, and I walked out for exactly $5,000.
Oh, wow, you got it down a bit.
And the way that I did that was I had exactly $5,200 from the insurance check from my previous car.
Yeah.
And I told him I had exactly $5 because I wanted to install the CD player in it. So then when they're like, well, lot fee, this and that. And I'm like, I don't have that. And he's like, I've never seen a car deal fall through for $500. And I was like, you're about to. You're not going to be able to tell me I have more money than I have. This is me wanting to get a car so I can stop getting rides to work. And this is how much cash I've got. Yeah, I left a bunch of dealerships. No one called me and asked hey, can we lower the price for you? They seemed I don't know. Maybe your mileage may vary in other places, but it does work if you're selling a car on the street. Like I said, I bet, Yudkowsky said not to employ this as a dark art because it's, taking advantage of people's biases, but it is something to be aware of.
Well, I know of one counter to this that I haven't personally experienced, but that I've heard of someone else doing. If someone gave him just like a really obviously lowball, like I think this car's worth $200 and it's a new car, they would say, "I'm not doing business with you, get out." And just be like, "That's it, it's over. You have insulted me." Like they took it personally, and it worked, I guess. They didn't get lowball anchored, but they also didn't get a sale.
Some good game theory.
Stephen, talking about influence, I just remember that it is a book about how other people will try to exploit biases to manipulate you, and the author recommends actually just pointing out the thing that they're doing. And I love the way he explained it, because it was like, okay, you've got this door-to-door salesman, and they are like, "Hey, here's a free gift. Also, would you like to listen to my sales pitch?" And he'll just be like, "Oh, that's the reciprocity thing. This is cool psychology. Sit down. Let me tell you about this." And like the person will just sort of like, the blood will drain out of their face. They're just like, "Okay, bye." Like,
You're like, "I read Influence Science and Practice. This was in chapter 2. Get off my doorstep."
well, he actually was very friendly about it, though. But he would just start excitedly. And it's funny because I don't know if he was actually proposing that as a debiasing method, or if he was just saying that, like, this is what I did because I was so excited about it and I'd just been researching it. So I was like, "Oh man, tell me more about your persuasive tactics." And the person's just like, goodbye.
Cool.
Anything else people wanted to say on this one before we go to the next one?
Anchoring's fun. Everyone should read Influence Science and Practice.
At some point, we need to contact the guy and see if we can just get a sponsorship deal going.
Well,
So we've mentioned it like more than a dozen times in the past couple years, I think.
maybe. He'd probably just enjoy the free publicity. I mean, he's going to be an expert negotiator, right?
And we're already giving it to him. It's not like he needs to pay us.
Tell him that you've mentioned it 100,000 times.
Our
It's the
podcast
most
is the kind of
important
thing he'd be
cognitive trick
interested
you'll
in.
hear all day.
Okay, that's probably it for that one. The next one was the Crackpot Offer.
The Crackpot Offer. This is fun. Yudkowsky says when he was very young, he thought he found a disproof of Cantor's diagonal theorem, a famous theorem which demonstrates the real numbers outnumber the rational numbers. He then discovered he was wrong. The thought went through his mind, "I'll get that theorem eventually. Someday I'll disprove Cantor's diagonal argument, even though my first try failed." And he began to look for disproofs. And fortunately, he caught himself very quickly. He says, "And then I realized something. I realized that I had made a mistake, and that now that I'd spotted my mistake, there was absolutely no reason to suspect the strength of Cantor's diagonal argument any more than any other major theorems of mathematics. I saw then very clearly that I was being offered the opportunity to become a math crank."
And to spend the rest of his life writing angry letters in green ink to math professors.
Yes.
Which he adds in parentheses, "I'd read a book once about math cranks." I guess that's a common, like, the green ink, huh?
So
I
yeah,
feel like maybe he's talking about having read Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, or one of the Feynman autobiographies. I think there were
I
two
mean,
or three.
this is actually a pretty common feature of having a physics department associated email address, is that you'll just get like 90-page Word documents and really crazy combinations of fonts and colors that are sketching their new geometric theory of the universe. And
Why?
like,
Are you subtweeting someone?
no, I'm not even. Like, I actually got multiple different ones of these from
I really hope there's a
from
blog
people,
collating them somewhere.
and it's like I actually kind of feel bad because, you know, as a person that wants to seek the truth in the world, you like want to try to explain why they're wrong, but it's not actually possible because you're sort of using this is actually kind of a reason why I'm gonna to devil's advocate on this a little bit and claim that this sequence actually isn't really representative of what it feels like on the inside to be a crank. It's not like you can just suddenly realize that I could have done this. It's more like you've built an entire language that only you speak, that is unfalsifiable within its own little like system that has been built, and trying to interact with that sort of system from kind of an orthodox system is almost impossible. And I don't know if it's as easy as just noticing that you could have gone the wrong way. It's more about it's an entire like edifice of theory and like internal trust in the methods of mathematics that actually allows you to notice that, oh no, Cantor's theorem must be true just because I believe all of the other steps of Cantor's theorem. It's kind of
I think that like you're totally right about that, especially once you've been doing this for all these years and built up this whole edifice that your personality rests on. But like if those people maybe in the very first step had just said, "Oh, I guess I made a mistake," and backed away, then they wouldn't have become cranks, which I think is what Eliezer's speaking about.
Yeah, I don't think that this is saying that it's easy. It actually says, like, I wonder how many people writing angry letters in green ink were 13 when they made that first fatal misstep. I wonder how many were promising minds before then. And he kind of points out how many, like, things he had on his side. Like,
Yeah,
it was-
like I don't even know if it's a like a slow slide into this sort of thing. It's almost a approaching the edifice of mathematics wrong from the start. Because like I don't think Eliezer ever would have become a crank, even if he hadn't yet been convinced that Cantor's diagonalization argument was wrong. Just because it's a really subtle argument, and like even professional mathematicians, when Cantor first posed it, were like, "This is nuts, Cantor, you're crazy." But like eventually they it's the whole philosophy of science thing where like you make an argument about a thing, and then people are like, "Oh, that contradicts my intuitions," and then they fight for a while, and then eventually they kind of like I think that whole sketch there is subtle and slightly different failure mode than is sketched by the sequence.
Interesting. Have you ever figured out? You said within one document they will vary drastically in font selection and colors.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is? Is there some reason,
That's
logic?
not just in math. Like, I have a lot of experience with people who just, like, I don't know, it's like my parents' generation, people using computers, they seem to think that, like, I'm just remembering, like, one of the doctor coordinators who writes a letter every Monday, and she always decides to just put, like, okay, we're gonna have, like, gigantic font, like, Happy Monday, y'all, and it'll be in pink, and we'll do a cool font, and then, like, I think, like, it's just that, like, oh, like, typography is not a thing that they ever learned, so it's kind of like, oh, look, I have all these choices of cool things I can do with the fonts, and like, I can pick whatever color I want. Why wouldn't I pick bright purple?
I can see if you're writing a dumb office newsletter, just bolding the important parts because everyone's going to skim this piece of shit anyway.
No, that wasn't what she's doing. This is a woman who is clearly just sort of picking a different font and color and size for every line.
Yeah,
And
it's sort of
just
it's
deciding
like
to italicize things.
professional mathematicians do have their own set of ways that they create emphasis in mathematical typography, and like it's sort of a crank's way of like trying to make emphasis not knowing the orthodox way to do it. So they'll bold things or italicize things or make things larger font to try. It's like a poor person's approximation of trying to add rigor by like making complex typography. I think that's what's going on, but I'm not sure.
It does seem interesting that like the cranks and conspiracy theorists seem to be on the same axis to me. And I wonder if it's like, it's just the type of person who their stance as they approach the world is not, I just don't want to do it the way you're telling me to do it, period, about everything that they've ever encountered since they were a child. And that not only includes doing math the way their teacher told them to do it, but also formatting documents the way they were told to do it. It's like a constitutional error that they're making that has influenced everything.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I did, to come back to the post, I found that this was sort of, at least in my opinion, felt like it was hinting at a later post that he makes called Privileging the Hypothesis, where, like, for some reason, to do a complete fluke, just a little mistake he made, he now had this fixation on Cantor's, as opposed to any of the other possible major theorems of mathematics, and there was no reason for it aside from random chance.
Yeah, and it sounded like, I mean, that also like ties into anchoring, but I liked the idea because I feel like this is something I had done before, might have done easily. I could empathize with it, of like, oh, I've seen a flaw in this thing, and then like, aha, I got one over on you, Cantor's theorem, and then it's like, oh no, it punched back. Well, now I gotta get revenge. It's like this very sort of like anthropomorphizing, I guess in this case, a theorem, but like...
And it certainly gets worse if you convince
really
yourself that you're right.
Yeah.
Or like a little bit right. What did he say? Like, I made a mistake, that was all. I was not really right deep down. I did not win a moral victory. I was not displaying ambition or skepticism or any other wondrous virtue. It was not a reasonable error. I was not half right or even the tiniest fraction right. I thought a thought that I never would have thought if I had been wiser, and that was all there ever was to it. and like coming down pretty hard on himself, I think, but important for the sequence. But like, I don't know, I worry a little bit sometimes about like how often he sort of chastises his past self, because I'm like, you were a little kid.
I mean, he came out looking pretty good in the post, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you guys ever read the comments on these?
Occasionally.
This is a tangent, but
I did way back in the day when they were first being posted. I do not have any memory of that 13 years ago, and I don't usually go over them again now.
it's just funny because whenever I accidentally see one, I'm like, oh my god, this is such a meaningless nitpick. It's a shame this is immortalized on this document forever.
Every now and then there's some good ones.
Every once in a while,
It's a proud rationalist tradition to meaninglessly nitpick things. I follow. In this tradition.
You're about to...
We disagree about this, Daniel, but okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I actually like.
you know I'm not serious.
I know.
It depends on, I guess, which sequence it is, but I got a lot of value out of reading some of the comments to some sequences, to the point where my memory of, I think there's things that I remember being in the sequences that I think were from the comments.
Yes.
And that makes it awkward.
Yeah. So it ends with, until you admit you were wrong, you cannot get on with your life. Your self-image will still be bound to the old mistake. You are being offered the opportunity to become a crackpot. I'm chopping it up a little. If no one bothers to argue with you, or if you never tell anyone your idea, you may still be a crackpot. Say oops and get on with your life. And my big comment on this is, well, first of all, he's again reiterating the one of the central values of rationality is being able to admit you're wrong and criticize your own ideas and just admit it and, update your view on the world. But my main comment on this is that due to other things, this is why I value open discourse so much, and I think this is why rationalists in general value freedom of speech, because it gives you the ability to find out that you're wrong, rather than have that ability removed from you entirely because you can't even find out if you can't talk about these things.
I really wish that this was, I mean, people are starting to talk, or maybe they have been for a while, about the value of failure, or the value of making mistakes and noticing them, like, maybe, particularly making mistakes. I spent a lot of my life being pathologically, risk averse. Like, I was so cautious, I didn't do a lot of things, and then, like, you don't learn if you don't try things and mess up, and I think that, kind of similarly, like, there's something important about being told you're wrong, and then, or like, coming to your own conclusion, like, oh, I guess I was wrong about this, and being able to update that. I think, like, postmodernism and pop psychology is really against, like, it feels bad to be wrong, and, like, I feel like there's this sort of cultural, well, we got to protect people's feelings thing, and also, like, people have to be able to save face, and there's always got to be this, well, there's, everybody has their own truth, or, like, nobody here is, like, wrong or bad or whatever. Like, it's just we all have an opinion, and it's like, that's not how concrete facts work, though. So, like, very often people are actually just wrong, and I think it would be cool if it was more socially acceptable, socially celebrated even, to come out and say, like, hey, I thought this thing, but then it turned out I did some math and I was wrong. Mm-hmm. It's like the whole replication crisis, I guess, kind of a lot of things.
Yeah. I think that people feel it as an attack on their ego when they're wrong. Like,
yeah,
like I wish
you're wrong and you're a bad person for having been wrong.
Like, I feel this strongly in I don't know, maybe this is unique, but in a bad way. But, like, I wish I had kind of absorbed these memes like 5 years earlier, because so much of my, like, high school and college was me taking, like, every bad grade as, like, a reflection on me as a human being, instead of just being like, okay, I'm wrong, I obviously don't understand this, and being wrong is actually good, and now I've learned that I don't understand it and I need to improve. And there's just a lot of unnecessary struggle there, for me, until I was really able to absorb, like, oh, I just don't understand it yet. I'm not a bad person. Like,
yeah. There's an excellent sequence from the Replacing Guilt series that is, I think, titled Update from the Sucker Punch, where the idea is, okay, like, you made a mistake, you failed, or you were wrong about something. Like, what was the lesson that you learned from this? Okay, like, have you internalized that? do you like feel the pain of that? Okay, cool. Now like you can update, and now you can get rid of all the guilt and shame because you've learned your lesson. And it's such a simple thing, but like reading, I don't know, the entire sequence also, of course, puts a lot more like, it does a lot more intuition pumps that help you really get like, dig your fingernails underneath this thing and pry it out. But I realized that was, yeah, just like a thing that had been part of my psyche for so long.
Yeah, it's hard because so much of like social technology is built around consensus, and oftentimes the things that one can admit to being wrong about are like sacred consensus building truths of communities, and it just makes everything so horribly poisonous when you're trying to seek truth around that whole cluster of hard to talk about things. It's a terrible prior for truth seeking.
Yeah, there's like the thing where a celebrity said something bad 10 years ago, and since then they've completely like, oh, I was a dick in the past. I completely changed my mind about this thing. That was bad and wrong, and I was dumb and young, and I shouldn't have done that, and like, I'm sorry. And that's not enough. It's just like, you said a thing once, and now you're bad forever. Like,
I think there's like easier examples. Like, if someone points out that you're pronouncing a word wrong, like I feel like this happened to me sometime in the last 6 months. Yeah, same here. And this wasn't 6 months ago. This was a few years ago. But I used to pronounce epitome epitome because that's how it's spelled. And there's a word for, I only ever read the word, never heard it. And so you speak it phonetically, not the way it's supposed to be said.
Most of my vocabulary, and so most of my life has involved people laughing at my pronunciation of things that I've only ever read.
Right. But like, so when someone corrects my pronunciation on something, oh, you know what? Actually, this happened recently with David reached out and said I was misusing the word misnomer.
Which David?
And he was like, would you mind if I corrected your misspeaking on something? I'm like, no, now I will be less stupid and sound less stupid for the rest of my life. Like, thank you. So like, this is like a really low emotional hit learning lesson. And that's the kind of thing that like everyone, I think, should feel that way about every time they're wrong about something. And like, I think everyone, what else are they going to do? Dig your heels in the sand and say, no, my way's right. You guys are all idiots. Like, so if everyone can do this on small things, it's just a matter of scaling up that skill to bigger things.
Yeah.
Being able to just laugh at yourself is invaluable.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think I had that skill until I was like 30. So
Same. I mean, that's hard though, like, because it requires a certain amount of self-confidence.
I have heard that if you succeed at everything you do, you are obviously not trying things that are hard enough. Because you should have some rate of failure, or you're really just not reaching your potential.
yeah,
Yep.
agree.
All right. Anything else? Should we get to our main topic?
Yeah, let's do that. But before, we will next time talk about... Oh, okay, here's a question. The next post in the LessWrong sequences is called Radical Honesty, and we kind of already did an entire episode on radical honesty. Do we want to just skip that one, or...?
We could do the 2-minute synopsis if there's any points in there that we didn't, that are worth pulling out.
Okay. In that case, next time we will be doing Radical Honesty, We Don't Really Want Your Participation, and Applause Lights. And Applause Lights is a famous one.
Just gonna say that's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So hitting another big one next week, or next